In November 1975, an enormous marijuana crop, 375,000 cannabis plants, and estimated 60 tonnes of pot, was discovered growing at Underbelly, south of Griffith. In 1977, Don Mackay, the man who informed the police about this massive crop, disappeared. In my book, The Killer Cop and the Murder of Don Mackay, I question the conventional version of the Mackay murder. Shows like Underbelly 2 present James Bazley as the murderer. Bazley is said to be the bargain basement assassin who does the deed for $10,000. I believe James Bazley was framed. The man I nominate as the chief assassin is Fred Cray, the killer cop. Fred Cray was in Griffith at the time, working for Frank Nugan at the Nugan Hand Bank to suppress a scandal concerning secret accounts in the names of a local marijuana growers at the Nugan packing shed. It was a result of this scandal that Don Mackay was murdered. In Underbelly, A Tale of Two Cities, the Mackay murder is portrayed as the work of a lone assassin, James Bazley. Underbelly's version of the murder is wrong because it's based on a snitch's tale, a story invented to get indemnities for serious drug crimes. The way snitch provisions work is that if you can offer the police a bigger crime than the one you're accused of, you can bargain with them for indemnities. The snitch was Gianfranco Tizzoni. The Victorian police dubbed him the Songbird, the Supergrass. Tizzoni and his gang got off their major drug charges by saying they were part of a much bigger crime, the conspiracy to murder Don Mackay, and offering one gang member, James Bazley, as a murderer of Mackay. Bazley had no alibi because he was a man on the run, having escaped from police custody. He was easy to frame. This snitch's tale is the source for the version of the murder in Underbelly, A Tale of Two Cities. Like Underbelly 2, Crime Investigations documentary, The Don Mackay Disappearance, also shows the murder as the work of a lone assassin, because it too was based on Tizzoni's lies. After shooting Mackay, Bazley, the lone assassin, drags the body to the boot of his car, puts it in the boot and drives off. The problem with the lone assassin theory is that Don Mackay was a very big man, 95 kilograms and 188 centimetres tall. The lone assassin, James Bazley, was slight, middle-aged and 168 centimetres tall. Ian Salmon was Don Mackay's friend and solicitor, and he discovered the murder scene about 1 o'clock the next morning.
So I drove into the hotel yard. I saw immediately in the headlights of the car that this was Don's vehicle. I drove up to it and saw the shocking evidence of a disaster. There was blood in the area of the door and the front of the car, and if I recall it correctly, there was also some blood on the wall. Then looking further, I noticed these cartridges on the ground. There were 3. I would say there were 22 shells. Nor, as I recall it, were there drag marks. If someone had dragged a heavy body, I would have thought some marks would have been left. I don't recall any drag marks. You'd have to be a very strong person to have lifted him and handled him without making some marks. was a big, strong, athletic man, for certainly. He was 15 stone. He would have been a very heavy and, I curse the word, dead weight for a lift.
There were 2 assassins. Another important witness, Andrew Lichtfield, visited the hotel bottle shop just before the murder. He walked through the car park at 6:30 p.m. and noticed a 1976 white Holden sedan with 2 men in it, parked opposite the Mackay van. On my reading of the evidence, the 2 assassins in the car park were Fred Cray and Keith Kelly, the 2 detectives hired by Frank Nugan. Fred Cray was the killer cop, Australia's Murder Incorporated. Cray arrived in Griffith on the morning of the murder.
Frederick Claude Cray, a descendant of a German immigrant family from the northern New South Wales Tenterfield area. And he became a detective, and he was probably the chief killer and I know this sounds terrible, but he was the assassin in the New South Wales Police Force. He murdered quite a number of people. Among them, high on our list, was that he was given the contract to murder Juanita Nielsen.
Why would Cray murder Mackay? Cray was in Griffith to hush up an affair involving secret accounts at the Nugan packing shed. Frank Nugan was using these secret accounts in his family's packing shed to wholesale an illegal vegetable. Truckloads of cannabis were leaving the Nugan packing shed and going to the markets in Sydney. Tony Reeves, the author of Mr. Big and Mr. Sin, is a leading Australian crime writer. While working for the ABC in the 1970s, Reeves met a truck driver who told him a remarkable story about the Nugan packing shed.
I spoke with the truck driver. He did the regular run, carrying fruit and veggies from the Nugan warehouse in Griffith to the markets in Sydney at Flemington. And on a couple of occasions, a few occasions I think it was, at the Griffith end, he used to load his truck. At the Griffith end, he was given some money and said, go to the pub and have a couple of drinks. We'll load the truck tonight. And when he came back, the fully enclosed truck was locked with a new padlock, and he drove to Sydney. And when he arrived at the Flemington markets, he was told the same thing. He was given $20, go over to the pub, we'll unload it today. And when he came back from the pub, the truck had been emptied out. Except for, on each occasion, he looked at it very carefully because he was very suspicious of what was going on. He found traces of marijuana leaves. He figured that if they loaded the truck up fully, it would probably be about 10 tonnes of marijuana, if they loaded it fully. That's a lot of grass was moving around. And going straight from the Nugan warehouse to markets in Sydney. But of course you couldn't... One of the difficulties I always had was, who do you tell this story to? Do you go to the police, the friends of Freddie Cray, and say, now listen, we've got a problem here, you know? You just couldn't go to the police and report this sort of story, because you might end up dead.
Through the scandal of the secret accounts, Don Mackay was about to find out about Frank Nugan's involvement in the drug trade.